Hello, everyone. This PowerPoint will cover Chapter 1, the introduction to the book, an overview of issues in criminological theory. I always state that this is the most important chapter out of the book because what it helps to do is set your expectations for the chapters that follow. So to begin with, what is criminology? Criminology is a scientific study of crime, and the primary question that criminology seeks to answer is why do people commit crime? In order to answer this question, criminologists will use the scientific method, which is essentially a set of guidelines and rules for how you go about scientifically analyzing observations, collecting data in order to be able to answer questions and hypotheses, which are basically predictions about the relationships between phenomena. Again, this class will specifically be addressed or aimed towards answering questions around why people commit crimes using various theories. The logical question that follows then is, what is a theory? A theory is a set of concepts linked together by a series of statements to explain why an event or phenomenon occurs. Theories provide explanations of why the world works the way that it does. We all have theories and explanations about why the world works the way that it does. And so many of the criminologists that we will be examining in this class, as we move from chapter to chapter, will look at how various theorists explain crime. So what is crime? Well, there are several types of various definitions of crime. There is the legalistic definition of crime, which is called mala in se, and this is basically evil in itself. Some crimes, without a doubt, are basically evil. But then there are also crimes that are mala prohibita. They're not necessarily evil, and people don't necessarily agree that they're evil actions, but they're declared evil because they are against the law. But in addition to crimes, there's also what's called deviance. And deviance is basically behaviors that, while not against the law, are considered to be abnormal and immoral by society at large. How doesn't that deviant? Well, in most cases, acts become deviant when most people agree that they're abnormal and unacceptable. However, they don't rise to the level of warranting being illegal. In this textbook, we will cover several different types of theories. And these theories are divided into what are called paradigms, which are distinctive theoretical perspectives. There are four major criminological paradigms. You have the classical school, positivism, conflict and critical school, and then finally integrated. Theories can be divided into micro level theories and macro level theories. Micro level theories focus on individual, personal level behavior, whereas macro level theories focus on group level behavior. So things like specific groups of people, whether it be racial groups of people, certain groups of ages of people, socioeconomic status groups, or even gender groups, would all classify as macro level theories of crime. Then there are consensual and conflict types of theories. Consensual types of theories assume that everyone agrees on what types of behavior should be considered illegal, whereas conflict theories oppositely believe that different groups disagree about what types of behaviors should be considered in violation of the law. And then finally, there are theories that examine human nature. Some theories assume that people are born good, whereas other theories will assume that people are born bad. When introduced to a new theory, it's extremely important that you be able to evaluate and assess the theories that you are reading. There are 6 criteria for a good theory. A good theory has these 6 criteria. The first criteria is parsimony, and parsimony only means simplicity. If a theory is parsimonious, that means that it is simple. The next characteristic of a good theory is scope. And scope essentially means that a theory can be used to explain a variety of behaviors and a variety of different types of crimes and offenses across various groups. So a theory with scope would be able to explain both white-collar crime as well as street-level crime. A theory that has scope could also explain violent crime and property crime. The third criteria is logical consistency, which says that a theory makes sense. So if a theory has logical consistency, then it makes sense at face value. Testability means that a theory can be tested using scientific methods, and empirical validity, which is extremely important, is the criteria that states that in order to be a good theory, a theory has to have research support. This is something that I'm going to constantly stress throughout this semester, that if a theory is good, then that theory has to have been tested and found to have some level of validity. And then finally, a good theory has policy implications, meaning that we can suggest real world policies and practices and interventions based on that theory in order to reduce crime. The last thing that I'd like to discuss from this chapter is criteria for determining causality. Most of the theories that you will be reviewing in this text and in this class will hypothesize that there is a cause and effect relationship between two variables, or two phenomena, or two concepts. Typically, when we're looking at causality, what we're arguing is that a variable, a predictor variable, or some concept can be used to predict another variable, which is classified by y. In order to say that one variable x causes or impacts another variable y, we have to be able to meet 3 criteria. The first criteria is what's called temporal ordering. That means that if x causes y, then x must occur before y. We cannot say that x causes y if x actually doesn't occur until after y. The second criteria for causality is correlation and covariation. And that simply means that in order for us to say with any level of certainty that x causes y, then there has to be a relationship between x and y. If the relationship between x and y, then it wouldn't make any sense to say that x causes y. And then finally, the third criteria for causality is spuriousness. This one is a little more complicated. But what spuriousness means is that in order for us to say that x causes y, we have to be sure that there are no other possible explanations for the relationship between x and y. The example that I usually give is when you examine the relationship between the level of education that one has and the income that one has. In most cases, we will hypothesize that people who have high levels of education will also have high levels of income. And that relationship seems to make sense because it meets the first criteria, meaning that most times people will obtain education first before they establish an income. And then there is a correlation or relationship between education and income as well. However, the relationship between education and income may be spurious because there may be third factors or more factors that might explain that relationship away. So, for example, a third factor that maybe might not be thinking about may be socioeconomic status. People from higher socioeconomic statuses will most likely have higher levels of education, which in turn will create a situation where they will have higher levels of income. And so once we consider socioeconomic status, it's possible that the relationship between education and income may disappear because the true cause or the antecedent cause of both education and income may be this third factor, which again is socioeconomic status. And so whenever we falsely assume that there's a cause and effect relationship between two variables without considering third or additional factors, then that is called a spurious relationship. These are the topics that are most important from this chapter. Please read over this chapter well and keep this chapter in mind as we move forward in this classroom, because we'll continue to refer to some of these comments as we evaluate and assess theories to come.